Bob, it is so good to see you. It must be Friday morning because we are here back talking contact centers. How are you, man?
Hey, Amos, I'm doing well. I think I just slipped a little yawn in there when you were saying hello, so hopefully no one saw that. But it's Friday, man, and even though my work is different these days, I still look forward to the weekends because other people that I like to hang out with are off.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Bob, I, as you know, ran many a contact centers. And there's a particular contact center I used to run back in the day, call it in the mid 2000s. And the attrition rate, it fluctuated, but call it seven, a little less than 10% a month, between 7 and 9% every month.
Yeah.
Well, I know the person who runs the contact center now. It's 15 years later. And would you know it? You know what their attrition is?
I would think potentially more, but is it the same?
About the same, right? It runs a little hot sometimes, but the average is basically stayed the same. So I went out and I looked at the national average, and there's different reports you can get elsewhere. But in the end, you kind of look at them and they haven't really moved at all in 10 years. My question, Bob, is contact center attrition a problem that is actually fixable?
Well, I don't I don't think that as an industry it's fixable. It would be interesting to look at that in comparison to maybe a retail person, the
Right.
retail. I don't want to compare myself to McDonald's if I'm a call center, but I might be able to compare myself to Marshalls or
Right.
something like that has a transient kind of environment to it. But what I would like to do with that data before I accept that there's not a way to fix it or not a way to make it better is to look at the highs and the lows of the data. Uh,
Yeah.
so what I mean by that is just like you can look at your average wait time for the day and you can say everything's fine. You can look at your average wait time from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. when half of your agents get up and go to lunch, and it could be horrible. So you're giving a bad experience 3 hours a day. So I'd like to look at the data because I think there's a large disparity between the mean and the centers that do care about their agents. And then one more piece, not to get too long here, but I think there's some disparities in the types of centers.
Right.
So transactional centers possibly have a higher or traditionally have a higher turnover rate. Outsourced centers have a higher turnover rate, whereas more like an insurance company or an in-house customer service organization probably has a lower.
Right.
Uh,
You're right. You brought up something that made me think about. You said, when you ran contact centers, you didn't like to compare yourself to fast food. Well, I worked for an outsourcer, Converges to be specific. In the early 2000s, I used to run a shop there. And in the same parking lot of the call center was a McDonald's.
okay, so people could walk out of your center and go to work at McDonald's.
Yeah. So, like, one day I'm in McDonald's and I am taking this thing so personally. I am like humiliated. I'm looking at this guy like, dude, you left my air conditioned contact center to come work here in the kitchen. And, you know, what he just said to me is like, there is less stress here. And I was like, oh my gosh, we are doing something wrong. And so, to that point, though, I want to get into there are people who are doing this terrifically. There are in house, Bob is exactly right. In house shops tend to outperform outsourcers. The kinds of things you do in the contact center, all of that matters. But the average or the median contact center leader will tell you, I have an attrition problem. And this has been true for decades.
Yeah, because 3% a month, even if you split it in half, is still a lot of attrition over a year.
That
So,
that is that is correct.
and the cost associated with it from a training perspective, from a constant hiring perspective, all of the cost associated with it. Cost shouldn't be the reason that you change it, but cost can be a reason to justify changing it.
Correct. The investments you're going to have to make,
Correct.
which brings me to what have we been doing as an industry? When you bring up the topic of attrition to contact center leaders, what I typically hear, and I'm sure what you hear too, is, oh yeah, we're doing some employee engagement stuff, pizza parties, gift cards. They do all of this stuff, and I don't hear enough about the job itself. I liken it to, you go into a steakhouse and they bring you all the A1 sauce and all the sauces right before the steak gets in. And I'm going, you guys don't want me to taste the steak, do you? Like, you are like, let me give you all this stuff to distract you from the main thing. And I think it's the same thing in the contact center, which is instead of fixing the job itself, instead of looking ourselves in the eyes and saying, why does, like in my case, why would people rather go work for McDonald's than work for me in my job? We instead go, maybe if we just bribed them and made this thing a little bit more fun, things would be better. When the whole thing is back to that young man from way back in the early 2000s who just told me there is less stress here, is if I were to unpack what he was really saying, what was giving him stress were a number of things, but top of those lists, Bob, the tools he was using, and number two, my and my team's level of trust in him, like
Yeah,
the freedom he
yeah,
had to go do his job.
yeah. Well, you you got ahead of what I was going to talk about because you nailed it, man. I mean, you can always look at the tools and you can always say that could be better. I think knowledge management and now AI assisted knowledge management and
Right.
what kind of calls are being routed to me and what does my CRM look like and how much data do I have on the customer and can I really know the customer? Like all of that definitely matters, but it the opposite of bribing, the opposite of not the opposite, but the necessity of making the bribe and the pizza parties and the ice cream sandwiches not be the point is changing the job. It's what are we doing to verify that we trust you as an employee? I think about things like, what kind of approvals do you need in order to give a credit? What kind of policies are in place that put the agent in a position where they're not supposed to go outside of this policy? How do we look at the job in a way that we're gonna give that person the trust? So I think you nailed it with trust.
What does that look like, though? What have you seen work? If someone's, sort of going, how do you begin to then build this trust?
Well, I think at the upper levels, at the directors and the VPs, it's a mind shift that we're that we I've got to change the way I hire. I've got to improve the way I train, but then I've got to make sure that I'm giving that person the authority to take care of customers. So I give you the job, but I don't give you the authority. So at that level, it's about the executive and the company trusting the employee. I think the most important aspect of the employee trusting the company probably comes in a contact center with the relationship with the supervisor. So do I feel like my supervisor trusts me? Do I
Mm,
trust them that they're
mm,
looking out for me? Right. And you could do this. You can probably name two people in your past life that had that kind of relationship with their team? You hopefully you can name a whole lot more than
Right.
two,
Right.
but two come to mind. Like Connie comes to mind for me in my center at Bell
Is that
South.
his real name? Tiny?
No, Connie,
Oh,
C-O-N.
Connie.
Right.
Okay.
No, it was a lady named Connie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she comes to mind
Right.
because she had this team that people wanted to go to. She had this team that she trusted them, they trusted her, and they just did better work than some other teams in the contact center.
You you're spot on. I think the last place I want to go is when we try to tell the audience what can they do. There's an interesting questions I used to ask in executives when we have conversations about the employee experience, and I ask, would you want your kids to build a career in the contact center? And most contact center leaders I talk to, senior leaders, say no. And that's my yardstick because what they're saying to me is, and they might say things like, well, maybe they start here and do something. Well, I happen to vehemently disagree. I cannot think of a better job where you get to work with technology, where you get to get processes and people and build. I don't think a more important department in the company exists. I'm biased. I've spent most of my career in this. But the fact that you do not think this kind of job is good enough for your kids, to me, is the biggest impetus for change that there is. So I'll put it to you, as we're on our way out. What can our audience, what are small or big things our audience can start doing?
Well, let's stay with the supervisors for a
Yes.
second because that's where we decided that the trust comes from.
Yeah.
There's been several articles I've read. I read something in Forbes. I read something in a contact center publication. I read something in several other places about how employees feel lonely. So some of that is COVID, some of that is work from home, but even the employee that comes into the office every day feels lonely. So let's break that down for a moment. What would I do to help you not feel lonely? Well, I would know you. I would begin to have a relationship with you where I know you and you know me. And so as a supervisor, I have to come to work and show myself. I have to be willing to open up. I was at a bank one time and I said something to the lady at the director level about her doing something silly. I don't even remember what it was. And she went, "Oh, I would never do that in front of my employees. They have to
Wow.
respect me. They have to respect me." No, they respect you because you understand how hard their job is. But let's narrow down into one little moment here. There's a lot of answers to the questions you asked, but lately, so how would I build a relationship? Well, let me ask 3 questions about those in attendance today. So can you do these 3 things? Can you name the first and last name of everybody on your team? And you're like, come on, Bob. I can name the first and last name of everybody on my team. Well, you had 3 or 4 new people come out of training last week. So it's the tall guy with the blonde hair, or it's John, but do you know John yet? So can you do that? I'm going to assume everybody on our call center podcast can already do that. So what else? So do you know what do they need to work on? Like where are their, what's the right word there? Where are their not faults, but
Like their opportunities.
what are their opportunities to get
Right.
better? Like do you know that? Like, can you look at John walking across the call center and go, man, I need to coach him on so and so, right? And then secondarily, do you know where they succeed? So when Sarah walks across the contact center floor by your desk, have you got a good opportunity to say something positive to her about how she worked that day or the day before, or the customer that she's talking to? And then last, because of time, can you tell me what they love in life? So can you tell me what's their family like? Most of the time people will put pictures or put things up on their cube to tell you what their passion is. So do you know their passion? Can you have a conversation I had a conversation with Scott Thomas about him playing in a band when he was in my contact center. I went to see Scott play at midnight one night because he was playing in a band. But I had the ability to talk to him about his passion. He in turn learned me and began to talk to me about my passion, which has been and was my family. Do you know about their family? Do you know about their hobbies? And all of that seems okay. That's all touchy feely, but again, if you're going to build a relationship with someone, those are the kind of things that make that relationship more than how many calls did you take today and what was your average talk time.
I couldn't agree more, and that's a great place to leave it. We tend to always forget because of all this technology and that we're not in a people business, we're not in an emotion business. So if you're uncomfortable with some of what Bob said, ugh, it's so squishy. I've been there. I've been there. I started exactly where you are, and over time, I realized that it's not a nice to have. It's the job.
Yeah, and that one thing isn't going to fix it. Like,
Right.
and oh, by the way, just because we haven't had much fun, we've been pretty serious in today's call. Here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to send an email to all your agents today and ask them for their first and last name and ask them what their hobbies are, because they're gonna feel a little creepy when you do that. This is something that you learn over time, but you begin to build relationships because those relationships matter to the employee and therefore impacts. We've all stayed at a tough job for a great manager, and we've all left a good job because we had a bad manager.
Amen to that. Bob, it's good to see you. Can't wait to do this again next time. And for folks listening, please, the way to support the show is like, subscribe, share this show with your friends, and reach out to us. We would love to take your questions as well.
Thanks, Amos.
To subscribe and listen to full episodes of the Contact Center Show, go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast.